Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Bloom here, back with another Survivor 50 preseason podcast as I'm giving you what you need to know about the cast of Survivor 50. And today, luckily, we have already passed Christmas, so it does not need to be preemptively canceled, but we have very much renewed, not canceled, our investment in Quintavious Q Burdette. The uniqueness of this character is represented in the fact that he is the only Q contestant across 25 years of Survivor. So we're going to talk a bit about what his one-of-a-kind game was and how it might be two-of-a-kind moving forward. Now, of course, it would be a big mistake if I did not get the chance to talk with this lovely man over the course of this series. So listen, it's going to be a tough task to try to distill this man's game down to a bite-sized podcast, but I can think of no better person to do it than the intrepid host of Pod Friends, the great Matt Scott.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. So glad we made it past Christmas because I was worried about that. And honestly, in doing my research, because I rewatched the whole season, I
Oh,
listened to Q's X interviews. There was one point where he did say that if he was not on Survivor 50, we'd have to cancel Survivor. So, phew, we dodged a bullet there.
luckily we were able
Yeah.
to avoid that. So, I mean, let's get into this because first off, I'm jealous you got the chance to rewatch Survivor 46. It is one of my favorite seasons in recent memory, and Q is a large part of that
Yeah.
because it's tough to really boil down the mayhem and chaos that really spread across the entirety wonderful group of 18 people in Survivor 46. But Q is perhaps like the mascot of that with a Q.
Yeah, the mascot. I love that. And I feel like the thing about him especially is that the narrative around Q, if you think about Q, if you saw Survivor 46, you're thinking about the chaos. You're thinking about cancel Christmas. You're thinking big mistake, like all of that, right? But then rewatching it, it's a lot more difficult to talk about his game because he, as he said, for 17 days out of the 26-day game, he was in control. Everyone was coming to him. It like literally, Mike, I do not remember him being in such a relatively good position. And then I watch it back and my whole opinion of him has changed. So I'm a Q defender. I'm
Yeah.
I'm all here for Q today.
Yeah, that's the thing, as we'll get into in just a bit with his story, is that, yeah, as much as we do remember Q as this wackadoodle, charming, yet disarming force of mayhem, yeah, he was in a very good position. In arguably one of the strongest positions on his disaster tribe, was pretty much safe through the entirety of the pre-merge, even when he was going to tribal every week. And then in the post-merge, set himself up with the majority alliance. Granted, it was
Mhm.
quite short lived. And then things just blew up, and leave it to an episode called Hide and Seek, Matt, for us to truly find who the real Q is.
Possibly the best one of the best segments in Survivor, by the way. Their hide and seek segment where it's like paralleling hide and seek with life. I've never done that as a kid. I've never looked at hide and seek as a way of like understanding people on a deeper level. But yeah, I mean, the idea of Q hiding in any context feels ridiculous, especially looking at season 50. And I do think that the fact that he's so out there and has such a persona that people feel like they understand, probably don't feel threatened by, is something that'll work to his advantage.
All right. Well, Matt, you mentioned it before, but I'm going to put you up to the impossible task of
Uh-oh.
trying to boil down the game of one Quintavious Q Burdette in Survivor 46. Like you said, a tale of two very different people almost. What is Q's story?
So, in my opinion, the story of Q is that he is a control freak, like total control freak along the way. That sums him up perfectly because when he has that control, when people are catering to him, when he's able to be a coach, a mentor, when people see Q's value and appreciate that, works out so well for him. And it's not surprising. Like Q is this top real estate agent.
Number
I have no
two.
clue.
Number two,
Number
Matt.
two, number two. Okay, and I do really believe like him not being number one definitely eats him up. We could go into that. You have to ask Q all about that. But, it's so interesting to me because we see from the very beginning, he was on the disaster tribe. Obviously, Jelinski was out first after, the sweat challenge that they had, which Q volunteered for. And Q was really big on. Q really pushed Jelinski out for not working super hard. Again, Q being in control. We see Banu on that tribe. And I really feel like Banu, who is a one-of-a-kind Survivor player for those who haven't seen the new era. Someone who was really out there to win 1 million hearts over $1 million is the best way to sum him up. Banu, I feel, broke Q. And Q, for about 6 episodes out of the season, about half the season, was in a great spot. He wasn't super chaotic. He was a little domineering, but people went with it. And, I think that when Q is in a great spot, that people respect. He functions so well in the game. He's great in challenges. He's pretty good strategically. He's not as bad socially as I think people might think, on the surface. And as we saw, it did get him all the way to the final 6 of his season. Things got a little wild when he threatened to quit and a few other choices that seemed a little bit more rash, but we're here to talk about that.
All right, well, let's get into some facts and figures about Q Burdette, the combine stats, if you will, for the former Ole Miss football player. Q Burdette, 31 years old, played, as we mentioned, on Survivor 46, where he did place in 6th after playing 28 days. You mentioned the Disaster Tribe. Yeah, only won 2 challenges in the pre-merge.
Wow.
And won 2 challenges in the post-merge. The most infamous, of course, him winning the Final 8 reward challenge, in which the reward was a trip to the sanctuary for a fully catered Applebee's meal. Decided to not take Liz Wilcox, who was allergic to everything except for the Applebee's menu, and an iconic moment ensued. But the bigger stat to draw attention to, Matt, 13 votes against. And this is really what we largely remember Q's game for, is that, as you mentioned, he's doing fine the first half of the game. And then it gets to this point where he decides to start turning things on his closest ally, Tiffany, which we'll certainly get into because she's a part of Survivor 50, decides to reveal that she has an idol, tries to turn things against her. It's not budging. There's a other plan moving to take out Tevin instead. And so Q, you'll listen to exit interviews more recently than me. From what I remember in talking with him, has never really truly found a baseline philosophy as to why he ended up doing this. I know he has said stuff about he looked at Liz and she was crying and so he felt bad and guilty. But at Tribal Council, he says, the only person who's going home tonight is me. And everyone is so confused. It's quizzical, if you will. They're basically saying wait, I thought the plan was Tevin. Q, why are you saying this? They largely stick with the plan, but Q's game craters after that. And basically at every single Tribal Council afterwards, he is going to get votes, but he is being used by people like Charlie, another player on this season, as a smokescreen, as everyone thinks, okay, we're just going to go for Q. He's annoying everybody. Nobody wants to work with him. But in the meantime, there's actually another plan happening while those other people are none the wiser.
Yeah, I love that moment at Tribal where Q threatens to quit or asks people to vote him out. In part because after the season, Q does claim that he had no intention of quitting. He was just taking accountability. It's kind of confusing to sort through. But the thing that I love about Q in that, really about the tribe, but Q's dynamic with the tribe in that moment and after, is that people were so upset with him because they wanted to work with him. He was factored into their game and into all of their plans. And I along the way, rewatching the season, I wrote down all the names they called him. I think they called him a loser at one point. Maybe he was a rat. Maybe he was a snake. Idiot was another word that someone threw. So people were really throwing it on hard. And, we have to appreciate the lack of respect for quitting. But there's a world where these people would not have been upset and would have just gotten rid of him if they didn't want him around. And yet, not only do they get so upset for him for, quote unquote, almost blowing up their games, but they keep working with him and factoring him into the plans basically as far as they need to or as far as they can, which is about 3 votes after that point, I believe. 4 votes
Yeah, I
after
mean,
that point.
this is the wild
Ridiculous.
thing because if you're Q, you know that you've ostracized yourself. You have firsthand evidence of someone reaming you out for not taking them
Mhm.
on a reward and quote blowing up my whole game. And yet, at the final 6, you find a hidden immunity idol. You have
Dude.
already seen 2 people get voted out with an idol in their pocket in Hunter and Tiffany. He had no idea that Venus, who was
Right.
happy to raise a voice with him at Tribal Council, had also got voted out with an idol. And so he says, "Yep, I'm going to play this." He has fashioned something together called a Q skirt, which is just a hoodie flipped
Mm.
around, tied on the waist. The idol is in there. But he, for some reason, is so incredibly confident that Charlie is going to go, that he has Maria as this close ally. He finally flipped Maria on her number 1 in Charlie, and the votes are there alongside him. He does not play the idol. And so after weeks
Mm.
of being the decoy, when he finally is the target and he has an idol at his crotch level, he chooses not to use it and becomes the final in an unprecedented streak of idol failures.
Yeah, like reach down, reach in there and pull out that idol. Like use it. What are we doing? But I also, in his defense, Q defender here. I mean, if your name is out there so often, and if people are genuinely targeting you, if the energy around tribal from some people is that they want to take you out, I mean, I could see not knowing when they're actually going to take you out, but he only had a couple of votes to use his idol, so it seemed like a dumb move. But in a season where famously, like nobody played their
Nobody played
idols,
their idol.
literally nobody.
A third of the cast
Ugh,
had some sort of idol or access to it at some point in the game, and due to a variety of circumstances, none of them played it.
ugh. Well, you know what? Good news. I voted for less idols in the hands of the fans
You know
poll.
what?
So
Actually,
let's hope.
that's very nice of you to be like, you can't make a mistake with an idol if you don't have access to one.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I do think Q probably could. I feel like he'd fashion a fake idol. Everyone would think that he has it, and then he wouldn't even play the fake idol. Like that's what I'm expecting of Q. So I can't even fault him specifically. I don't know what was going on with this season and people not playing their idols, but it's iconic, and it obviously influenced how many other people, many other seasons play Survivor since. So, or
Matt,
and then again, maybe it's come back around with Rizzo on season 49 not playing his idol for so long, but that's a whole other story.
it's true, though nobody's seen 49, so maybe they don't even know.
Yeah.
So Matt, you've sort of alluded to this before, but if you could distill Q's biggest strength down to one quality, what do you think that would be?
One quality, I would say that to me, it seems like and it doesn't translate all that well through the edit, but his ability to keep these relationships, congenial at the very least, or collegial at the very least, where people want to work with him. People do want to talk with him. To borrow from Charlie, who's also on season 50 and his love of Taylor Swift, it doesn't seem like there's bad blood in the context of, people wanting to work with him and talk with him. So I would say that's actually his biggest strength, is that other players in season 46, namely Maria, constantly want to factor him into plans, regardless of what he's doing at tribal, what he's doing around camp, the chaos that he's causing. That goes a long way. People need to be okay with having you around, and they need to not hate you. And I don't think that they actually hated him. I think they hated his gameplay at points, but I think that again comes from a place of his gameplay messing up their gameplay, which
Hmm.
obviously that's understandable.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point in that, yes, his relationships absolutely get decimated with specifically Tiffany and Kenzie, who up until that quitting episode were his 2 closest allies. But as you mentioned, he does cultivate this relationship with Maria. She is sort of
Mhm.
like the one person that maintains this bond with him. She brings him on a reward for that pizza, despite the fact that he just went to Applebee's, which is
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous. But like, it's clear there was something there between the two of them. And I do think, as you mentioned, Q works in a business that is all about interpersonal relationships. I think he
Mhm.
can be very congenial and charming. Again, there's a reason why he was in such a good position at the
Yeah.
point of that Tevin vote. It's more so if you're looking at good prospects for Q, you want him to channel that element and less so what we kind of remember him for, which is everything that came after that.
Oh, totally. And I mean, it just even breaking it down a little bit more, like on his initial tribe, there was that power three group of Q, Tiff, Kenzie working together really closely. And even then, as they got rid of Jelinski, of Jess, of Banu, all of them looked to Q. Everyone was looking to Q for guidance. Q was the coach, he was the leader. Everyone seemed to respect that. Then there was this, I mean, arguably, maybe a brilliant, definitely brilliant on paper idea of the cross tribal alliance of I think
Yeah.
Q and Tiff, like Tim,
So yeah,
Maria, Hunter, Tevin. That did not work out. But there were all these different things that kind of came up, and Q managed to be at the heart of the strategic force in the game so much of the time in the game.
yes, he even says in confessional, I think that's a great idea. Now, moving over to the weakness, I think you underlined
Mhm.
it perfectly before. It's the necessity for control.
Yeah.
Like, Q is just not the type of person necessarily to be like, "I'll do what you wanna do." I think he is, and it's an audacious personality that has made him such a great go-getter in his real life. I think he was able to benefit from the fact that, again, in this first half of the game, he was in such a good position that the decisions he was making were the ones that were largely carried down, right? Like, he could
Mhm.
say, "Yeah, you know what? Let's get rid of Jess tonight
Yeah.
instead of Kenzie. Yeah, you know what? I want to get rid of Tim because he brought Ben up instead of Ben proper." Like,
Mhm.
he was able to bring down a lot of authority there, and it largely worked. But then we get to the prospect of, hey, if someone else wants to do something and go in a different way that goes against Q's beliefs, then to a certain extent, he almost takes his ball and goes home, or tries to at least, which is again what happened with this Tevin vote, where it's, hey,
Mm.
let's go for Tiff. I'll tell you something that'll bring you over the line. She has an idol. Nope, we're still going to do Tevin. Well, then it's me. I'm sorry. I'm done right now. And I know that there were other reasons behind it, but I think the way
Right.
it was certainly being perceived by people was like, oh, I couldn't get my way, so I might as well go out of the game then. And that is a really tough perception for someone you would want to ideally work with.
Yeah, and I mean, looking ahead, I would be surprised if that happens again, only because Q experienced Survivor the first time around. It wasn't the ideal situation in terms of his tribe. He made the best out of it for a long while, and then, things kind of didn't work out. But if we have Q attempting to quit again? Like, I think Jeff's gonna lose it. I think Jeff will literally, like, flip over the little stool he sits on, the little thing he sits on, and
Yeah,
just,
with
like,
his
walk
bowl of
out.
licorice and popcorn.
Yeah.
As we talk about perception, I think the thing that I'm largely intrigued by as we look ahead to season 50 is not to say that coach and Q are incredibly comparable. You called Q a coach, an advisor, a mentor
Mm,
beforehand, but we certainly saw with coach, like, oh, people liked the Dragon Slayer stuff. Oh, they liked the poems. May not have done well on the island, but people ate it up at home. And I think you do see in future seasons
mm,
coach steer into the curve a little bit. And not to say that I don't think like the antics Q was doing on 46 were incredibly inauthentic. I don't think he was putting on a character that is completely separate from who he is as a person. But do you think,
uh-uh.
given the most memorable parts of his character, he is gonna make, I don't know, a game of Red Rover this time? We even see in the preview, Matt, he says, all right, this time you can cancel your birthday, your wedding anniversary, your Arbor Day, etc.,
Oh my
etc.
god.
I mean, do you think that could be happening, and do you think that might affect any sort of perception he might have?
First of all, I love my holidays. I love my days off. Like, I don't please don't cancel all those things. I mean, Arbor Day you could have, but other than that, please. Like, Labor Day is great, Memorial Day, all of it. Um, I I think it just adds to this goofy perception of Q.
Mm,
And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, in a season when you show up on a beach and you are looking at, like, okay, who do I know? Who could I work with? Who do I feel like I need to get rid of immediately? Q, I don't think, I mean, I do think maybe the one thing working against Q is the chaos. But I
Hmm.
also see him having that ability to form really great relationships with people and surpass that initial perception of chaos. So I mean, I think it's a smokescreen for like a game where he has potential to do much better than any of the other players probably would perceive from my perception.
All right, well, let's get into some of those other players, Matt. Let's talk
Yeah.
about the rest of the cast of Survivor 50. Now, we have to start with the familiar here because these are complicated relationships, to say
Mm,
the
to
least.
say the least.
Let's get to the less complicated one first. Let's talk about Charlie. And it's odd to say less complicated because Q does end up trying to vote against Charlie, does not vote for Charlie to win either. Charlie is part of this group that blindsides Q with an idol in his pocket. Do you feel like there is any sort of, as you mentioned before, bad blood going on between them based on sort of the tit for tat they had towards the end game of 46?
I do, actually. I can see it. But I especially think that Maria is at the heart of that, where
Mm,
Maria seemed to really entertain Q, want to work with Q. Obviously, things with Maria and Charlie by the final tribal were not great, to say the least. And so I could see there being issues between Q and Charlie because it really did feel like to me, and maybe this is the case of a lot of Charlie's relationships or a lot of Maria's relationships, but it seemed like those two were together. And so I wonder if Q and Charlie might have some beef at some point. Then again, like I'm saying, like I would not be surprised if Q has had an ability to form a really strong relationship with Charles. So we'll
I
see.
think,
But
well, I agree that I would not be surprised if, like, interpersonally,
sure.
they're fine. I think the issue with the two of them, and we'll certainly get into it with Tiffany, is that I don't know if the other two 46ers would trust Q to the fullest extent. You
No,
know,
of
like,
course not.
how much would they trust giving information to Q, knowing that, as he showed with Tiffany firsthand, it could get to a point where if he feels it's advantageous for him, he will spill any and all secrets.
I will also say I could imagine a world where when you get out to the island, when you get out to Fiji, you see who's there. You're in Fiji, in the same place where you played. All the feelings come rushing back, and you don't want to deal with a queue all over again. That's the one big problem with Q, place where he made a big mistake in 46, is that he didn't seem like the most calming,
Mm.
comforting, relaxing, easy breezy person to work with, Mike. Like it he was doing a little bit too much and that's exhausting. Like get him out of the way because he is so unpredictable in so many ways. If you say the wrong word, then Q might turn his back on you completely. And I think that's a good thing for us to keep in mind with anyone from his cast who's on this season.
Well, we need to turn to, I think, an even thornier duo
Uh-oh.
here in Q and Tiffany, because to say this went sour would be an understatement to the taste of sour in general. These two were, again, thick as thieves. And then Q
Uh-huh.
decides to out this information about Tiffany's idol, and she goes ballistic on him. When the two of them are in the game together, basically every chance they could get, the two of them are spatting.
Yeah.
On the mat, at Tribal Council, even when Q tries to do a make good to Tiffany and take her on reward, she's still like, I'm not having any of it. I'm snapping that olive branch right now. Like, she is probably one of the people who detested him the most. And maybe it's because she had gotten so close to him. Do you think, like you're sort of surmising with Charlie, there's a chance they were able to build a bridge and get over it? Or is this like shades of Philip and Francesca? Like they're going to pick up this rivalry from where they left off?
Ooh, I mean, there are two ways that this could go in my mind. One of them is that they cannot work together. And I think Tiff especially in my mind would be the one who's coming in saying, I need to get Q out. Like we need to get Q out no matter what it is. Let's take him out. Even, just thinking about how she could move through the game. And I know this isn't focused on Tiff, but I could imagine a world where she's talking about how negative it is that Q
R-
is there for her game.
Right.
The other level of it though is if they manage to work together despite the fact that they had that relationship and use that again as a smokescreen. So I look, I really don't think that they're gonna work together. I just don't think that Tiffany wants to repeat history, especially that history from 46. But um, I could see a world where they work together because you're out there with 23 other people in the case of season 50. You don't you know people to various degrees. You might
Mm.
know people through forming friendships and relationships, especially if you're one of the new era players with some of the new era people through all sorts of all sorts of means, right? But I just don't think that like any of the new era people from season 46 like need to work with Q
Mm.
because there are other folks that you've probably formed relationships with across seasons, whether season 45, 47, around the new era, but especially those seasons that are right around the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it clear as day, Matt. Q comes up to Tiffany. He's like, I've got a great idea. We're
Mm.
going to pretend that we hate each other. And actually, we're going to have this undercover alliance that nobody knows about. We're going to be the frenemies. And Tiffany would agree to that on the surface.
Oh,
And then,
totally.
and then she's going to hit the beach and meet these other people. And she's like, I would much rather sort of start a new relationship with these much more reliable people than try to maintain this weird Salmon Diane platonic thing
Hmm.
going on with Q where we hate each other, but we actually are working together on the side. And so I don't know how long that plan would actually last, but I 100% believe that's something he would come up with in the preseason.
Oh, totally. And it would be ridiculous for him to think that that would work, uh, but entertaining for us, right, Mike?
100%. Well, who will be entertaining Q's prospects of being an ally right now? Outside of the 46ers, is there anyone that you're eyeballing could try to work with this guy considering what they know about him?
Well, I'm looking at other players w- who could use Q as a shield or as a sword. Rizzo is one person that jumps out to me. For instance, someone who is a bigger player in his own right. Obviously, the other players haven't seen the game that happened on season 49, but I could see a Rizzo wanting to work with the Q if he wanted to cover up a bit of his game. Similarly, thinking about chaotic folks or folks who are really out there who could use Q as more of a shield. Maybe Rick Devens. Rick Devens, uh, king of the idols, big personality in his own right. I could see him leaning into Q being the shield. Um, those are two who really come to mind. But honestly, I think anyone who tries to weaponize Q is smart. I mean, there is a lot of chaos in his game, but if you don't like piss him off, like you could have a really solid ally who could win challenges, who's going to be loyal, who's going to be willing to quit when you need him to quit instead of you going home. Like that's the type of ally that I like. So I could see Q having a bunch of people who want to work with him and weaponize him. On the flip side, could also see a bunch of people who want to just like get rid of him because of the chaos he causes. But
Yeah, I'm
um,
calling I'm calling him right now. Mike White, I think, is going to love Q. I mean, he's a
yeah.
little Angelina coded, no? Like a bit of a
Hmm.
kooky character who likes to have his way, even if he's not necessarily vibing with the rest of the tribe socially. Mike has tamed that dragon before, in a manner of
Ooh.
speaking. I think he would be more. Plus, I think he just likes the entertainment of
Oh,
getting to exist
totally.
alongside Q on a day-to-day basis.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think Mike White's also another great person to put in that bucket. So I'm all for that. I want everyone to try to work with Q. And then if they're mistaken, if it's a mistake, like it's fine. That's again great for us.
All right. Well, what about on the other side of things, Matt? You alluded to it. And look, there is a good
Mhm.
amount of possibilities that even if people came in without the intention to target Q, a certain
Oh,
amount of time could pass and then that mood turns. But is there anyone on the surface that you think, just from the prospect of who they are as people and players, would not get along with Q?
Aubrey.
Well,
It's
yeah.
established.
So we've got that, right? For those that don't know, Q was approached by a woman named Mariah at the merge, and to
Mhm.
help, bridge the conversation, Q asks, "Who's your favorite Survivor player?" And Mariah replies, "Aubrey." And Q immediately goes, "You've got to go. If your favorite player is Aubrey, that means you're a schemer. That means you can't be trusted." So, like, I don't know. Like, I think Aubrey was cast in her own right, but I think there's got to be at least like a 2% chance that one of the reasons she got brought on was for hopefully an encounter between her and Q, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it, like just thinking about that specifically, because that dynamic between Aubrey and Q, I don't think it will be great. I'm almost thinking to myself, who's more likely to fall on, in the Aubrey camp versus in the Q camp. And I don't know. I'm very curious about this. Like, I would love to see, and this is the beauty of season 50. I would love to see a Q Emily Flippin interaction. Like, I'm curious how Q and Genevieve would work together. That's something that's been on my mind for a
Mm,
while, because I think back to, like, just in terms of like the chaos of players and allies. Rome was such a chaotic player
yeah.
in the game for with working with Genevieve, and she was able to do that. So maybe that's
And,
another
and
vote
she
for
and she
someone who could
arguably
work
had a very
together.
similar arc to Q, where like
Oh,
she was
totally.
controlling a lot of stuff, and for very different reasons, her game ends up cratering her position, and so she ends up surprisingly spending like until her dying day being on the bottom of the tribe.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Matt, I've got one final question for you.
Uh-oh.
And this perhaps might be the hardest iteration of this question for any of the players we've talked about so far. But
I'm
listen,
ready.
you're an imaginative man, so I want you to draw us a picture of why Q Burdette will win Survivor 50.
That's easy. Because Q, he's gonna go out there. He's gonna be wearing his Q skirts. He's gonna be giving out Q skirts to
Hmm.
people. He's gonna come up with something new along the way too. Lots of games of hide and seek. He's gonna bring that big camp counselor energy, and people are just gonna fall into it. I don't think Q is gonna be as bad to play with as anyone along the way. He's going to be solid in challenges, but he's not a Jonathan out there who's a massive challenge threat. And I just see a world where he's going to skate his way to the end. He's going to find all of the idols, Mike, easily. He's going to find
Is
all
he
the
going to
idols.
play all the idols?
No, he won't. But at the final tribal, he'll show up and be like, look at my idol, look at my safety without power, which I didn't use for some reason. Look at my, my knowledge is power. He's gonna have all the power.
Hmm.
And I do believe that in 50, or I shouldn't say I believe this. I think Q believes that in season 46, if he made it to the end, he had a shot at winning. I could see it. I could see it, especially if someone who's that egregious makes it. And I could see that here. I don't think it's as hard of a case or as far fetched of a case as most people. Like, he's not truly a goat. He's not really truly a villain. He's not dumb. He's not as bad as I believe people will perceive him, and I think that's what makes Q dangerous. Everyone else who's out there, you could make a case for why you need to get rid of them immediately. Q is not one of those people, unless you don't like chaos. But we all love chaos, right? We want good TV.
And yeah, here's the thing is that I do think, to a certain extent, without getting too much into my interviews with these players, I think a lot of them
Ooh,
are coming in to 50 with this aspect of this is season 50. Like, we need to make this a good season. Returning seasons are very
yeah.
hit or miss. We need to be on the hit side of things. So I think that might lead to maybe a larger propensity than you might think of, like, I want to work with Q, or at least like let's entertain his antics more than maybe you usually would. The
Hmm.
question is, how far will those antics take you? I certainly hope it's to the end because, listen, Q is, I think, one of the most dynamite characters we have had on the show in some time, certainly in recent memory. So any amount we'll get of him is great, especially considering that he is, as you mentioned, willing to replay the old hits, but also do a little bit of a mix on them as
Mm.
well. So I am thrilled. Any amount of Q we're getting on our screens is a good amount of Q we're getting on our screens.
And I will just add 1,000% I agree. But the way that Q moved through 46, forming alliances, just the fact that he moves so quickly, plays so hard, I don't see that working against him. He's not the type of player to necessarily form conflicting alliances or form alliances with everyone and then make people angry. I think he's going to play hard and fast, and some of these players who are not ready to keep up with that pace are going to fall by the wayside, while Q skates ahead. So I'm just saying, if if you're out there, I will be the first person, the first vote, the first draft pick for Q as the winner of season 50.
All right, cue this clip up for if and when it happens.
Get me my Q skirt.
There we go. Well, Matt, you did not skirt around the
Ooh.
larger things when talking about Q's game and what that might mean for Survivor 50. You did an absolutely fantastic job, as you do with everything, including Pod Friends, which of course is
Yes.
commemorating another Survivor offseason with another round of fantastic interviews. What would you like to plug for the listeners out there?
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. I like to plug Pod Friends, of course. Check it out. Pod Friends, where I interview people who are in the RHAP community. That could be players of shows, that could be podcasters, including folks like Mike Bloom. Just had Shannon. I did have for the season already Shannon Gus and Peter Gus as the season premiere. Also had some Survivor players as guests. So check that out. Pod Friends has its own feed wherever you get your podcasts. It's on YouTube. Also like to plug The Pride Has Spoken, interviewing LGBTQ plus Survivor players, along with Dr. Evie Jagoda of Survivor 41, who in my mind should have been on season 50, but that's a whole other conversation for a different time. And of course, the wonderful Grace Leader. So those are my plugs. And check me out wherever you get your social media, Matt Scott GW on those platforms.
All right.
Wherever they are.
Coming up, we've got another, I'd say, relative wild card. Someone who also had a little bit of a game from the outside towards the tail end of their season, who caused a bit of havoc in Tribal Council, and that is, of course, Rick Devens. What are we to expect from his very up and down season on Edge of Extinction, and what that mean for Survivor 50? You'll find out very soon. But in the meantime, I am very interested to hear from you all as to how you think Q is going to do. Is he going to invoke more of that first 17 days Q, or will the Q we know and love be here to stay? Only time will tell. February 25th cannot be here soon enough. I've got a closet full of Q skirts ready to go. Thank you all, as always, so much for listening. Matt, thank you so much for the fantastic insights. Until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.